Welcome back to this series on recovering and discovering the Miles Gordon Technology SAM Coupé. Up to this point, we checked the power supply to make sure it was safe and that it was outputting the correct voltages. And it was. We checked to see if the SAM Coupé actually worked. And it did. We had some display issues that are likely due to a combination of a noisy power supply and using RF. We checked the ROM version. It's held on this EEPROM. We typed print peak 15 and the result was 30. Divided by 10, that means it's version 3. But both the drives are dead, leading us and leaving us up a cul-de-sac of disappointment. Let's see if we can fix that right now. Mark fixes stuff. Our SAM Coupé is already in bits. These are the two drives, and we're lucky to have them. In this video, we're going to repair one of the drives. The plastic case around a SAM drive is only held on with plastic clips, which is really handy. The drive is quite loose inside this plastic case, but it's held firm when it's installed in the SAM Coupé itself by some machine threaded screws to the underside of the computer. These Citizen drives and similar models appear in quite a few old retro computers. To remove the top shielding, we simply need to remove one screw. Once that screw is removed, all we need to do is pop a small locking lug out the front of the shield and the whole thing lifts off easily. And as we saw in the previous video, it's pretty obvious why this drive isn't working. That belt's definitely seen better days. But that's not the only problem, because these capacitors are known to leak. Although this one down here doesn't seem to have leaked at all. But this one down here definitely has. I can actually smell it. And if you've ever wanted to see what leaked electrolyte looks like on a board, well, it's your lucky day. It's this green goop, an alkaline that eats into the board itself. To start this assembly, we need to remove this dust shutter. We'll also remove the eject button, just to stop it getting knocked off and lost whilst we're working. There's a spring tensioner on the dust shutter, and it actually stops the dust shutter itself rotating to the point where it will come out. We need to remove the spring out through the slot. This will then allow us to rotate the dust shutter to the point where the keyed peg can slide out of the hole. There shouldn't be any force used. Let's put this aside now. The eject button is just held on by one little latch. The gantry frame at the back holds the spindle motor. We're going to need to route the new drive belt around the spindle, so we need to remove the screws holding the frame so that we can move it out of the way. The gantry frame is responsible for holding the spindle motor, but it's also responsible for maintaining the integrity of the drive frame. The spindle motor is now just connected by two soldered wires. Because it's going to get in the way, it's far easier to desolder these temporarily than have them flopping about. I've left the circular polarizer on my camera and it's not showing the numbers on my soldering station now, but it's 340 degrees centigrade. At that temperature, it'll only take a really quick dab with the end of the soldering iron to release those wires from the board, and release us from the hassle of the gantry flopping around on these fragile wires. There's nothing to solder for a while, so I like to coat my tip before I pop it back into the soldering iron holder. Right, now we need to remove these springs. They're actually called extension or tension springs, with these being the dual hook variety. It's easiest to remove them with a hook tool. If you use a straight tool, they'll slip off the end and disappear forever. If you don't have a hook tool, don't worry. You can bend the end of a piece of wire or a resistor to do the same thing. I've got a hook tool, but let's be honest, no one's seen that for years. The resistor body makes a handy little grip as well. These springs are responsible for dropping the diskette onto the heads, so if they're missing or have lost tension, then you won't be able to put discs into the drive. The mechanism simply won't lower to engage the diskette with the read-write heads. With the springs put to one side, we can now remove the top half of the diskette cage. This is actually pushed into place and not meant to be removed. If we look down the side of the drive, we can see it's held in place by track-led pinions. So the question here is, how do we get these captive pinions out of these engaged-disengaged tracks? And when we do remove the top half of the diskette cage, the floppy drive heads will crash together. So we need to avoid that, and for that I've made a tool. This is my head spacer that I use when I'm working on drives. It keeps the top and bottom heads separated, and we'll need to pop it into place as we remove the drive cage. As we can see, looking at the track-led pinions, there's literally no way to get them out. They're pushed here and left here until the whole thing is meant to be recycled, as if that was a thing in the 1980s. But luckily I'm in a brutal mood, and I know that by bending this corner out, we'll be able to free this pinion. Just the act of removing one pinion will then allow all the ones on the right hand side to come out, and then the ones on the left will just slide out easily. As I put the top part of the drive cage to one side, I remember to hold the heads apart and reach for the chock, which fits over the drive heads themselves, giving them support whilst not stressing the mechanism. And that's really important. In these drives, the old belts kind of expand over time and perish, unlike some belts which turn into a black tarry goop. That being said, there's a bit of cleaning to be done on these rollers, not too much though. Also, this roller here needs a bit of a clean, and of course we'll need to clean the drive spindle on our motor. But before we can even think about the belt, we need to address the problem of these leaked capacitors. Back in the 1990s, there was a bad batch of capacitors that caught out lots of manufacturers, and now we have to remove them. Before we do that, we'll need to remove these drive cables so they're not in the way. If we kill these drive cables, it will be game over for this drive. Fitting new diskette heads without an alignment disc is very difficult, and that stuff simply isn't available anymore. It would be bad juju to have these flopping around. So let's grab some tape, and with that tape we'll secure them out of the way. Perfect. Okay, I think I know which way this is going. This heavy alkaline corrosion needs to be reversed. For that we need a mild acid, something like vinegar. The real problem here is that the pitting that the alkaline leaves on the surface of the solder creates a barrier and makes it really difficult to get any form of heat into that solder itself. This can mean that we end up using far too much heat to try and desolder these caps, often much more than the board itself can take. Plus, it really stinks whilst you're doing it. I mean, it really pongs. So it's time for some rage bait. Holding down the cap to avoid any twisting, I bring my sharp side cutters in, and making sure the cap doesn't move, I cut right through it. Does this put some stress on the board? Well, yes, a little bit. But weighing it up, I'm not sure if it's any more or less damaging than using loads of heat to get through that leaked electrolyte. For what it's worth, I've worked on this model of board before, and sometimes the caps just literally drop off the board. The electrolyte having got underneath the connections and, well, basically weakened them. The PCBs in these Citizen drives are really tough though. There are some boards I wouldn't do this technique on. Anyway, by now some people will be in an apoplectic rage. I absolutely encourage you to tell me what you hate about this technique in the comments. Also, feel free to share this video with all of your friends and tell them what I've done so that they can come and watch too. But I absolutely promise you that the pads will be okay. They really will. Joking aside, this is a technique that I've genuinely used for many years. and it's got an incredibly high success rate. I'd never suggest twisting a cap off, but by removing the capacitor this way, we can remove the body separate from the leads and see what's going on underneath. And in this case, it's pretty disgusting. The non-polar capacitor is a different brand and hasn't leaked, so I'm going to cut that one off just to show you the difference underneath between the leaked capacitors and the one that hasn't. Quite a stark difference, I think you'll agree. And sometimes the best way to remove this dirty solder is to hold your nose and apply the iron. And we really can see that even at 350 degrees Celsius, this pitted solder does not want to flow. Adding fresh leaded solder helps here. The flux core mixes with the existing solder and helps all the crud float to the top. I'm using a bit more than I usually would here just for demonstration purposes, just so you can see all that stuff bubbling away. And once it's all molten, some of AliExpress's finest solder wick will remove all of that solder. And once the solder's gone, the sticky residue that's left behind can be removed with isopropyl alcohol and a cotton bud. Just for contrast, merely waving the soldering iron in the direction of the unleaked pads and both the leads come off, leaving shiny pads behind. This really is a stinky drive. It smells like a fishmonger's dustbin. I've never been so happy to have a fume extractor in my whole life. Well, apart from when Big Si comes to visit. The flux from the new solder really helps clean these pads. I mean, it looks a bit horrifying when you're in progress, but at the end we'll have a nice result. Again, isopropyl alcohol is the key here. I've had a general clean around the board with vinegar as well, but I did that off camera. The reason for the vinegar is it stabilises any of the electrolyte that's still on the board and stops it doing progressive damage over time. I feel a bit sorry for anyone who's come here for a bit of relaxing soldering footage and ended up watching this horror show. But please don't worry, I have done this before. In fact, I've been working on floppy drives since the mid-1990s when I worked in a diskette duplication factory. Okay, time for some new capacitors. I've got SMD replacements for the 22 microfarads and 10 microfarad parts, but unfortunately I couldn't get a 2.2 microfarad non-polar capacitor. So we're going to have to shoehorn this whacking great big through-hole capacitor in there somehow. For the SMD caps we'll use some leaded solder paste. It's quite warm in here, so my tip's gone a bit drippy. I must remember to pop it back in the fridge afterwards. Placing a 22 microfarad 16 volt SMD capacitor in the right orientation on the board, I lost my mind a bit and made a genuine mistake. You see, those cable sockets are made of plastic, and that hot air gun is 350 degrees Celsius. People out there with engineering degrees or an ounce of common sense will see the problem. I suddenly realised my mistake, so I put some heat resistant Kapton tape over the sockets to try and deflect the heat. And that was a stupid move as well. The tape lifted up and just made a nice little hot pocket, which trapped the heat and made the sockets go all bubbly. The cap's good though, look at that. I'm a bit gutted, but I leave my mistakes in. I do it so you don't have to. I do actually have some of those sockets in my parts drawer. I could replace them, but I suspect that these ones will still work okay. For this one I was super careful because we're next to the drive home position sensor, which is a plastic optical sensor. If I melt that black thing, well, it's game over because I don't have one of those in my parts drawer. I made pretty darn sure that I didn't get any hot air anywhere near that plastic part. And that's what you call learning from your mistakes, ladies and gentlemen. This capacitor is going to be slightly awkward, but I think we'll be okay. Honestly, the hardest part is putting them down on the pads. They always seem to be perfectly aligned until you decide that you're going to sabotage yourself and flick the bloody thing across the room. This one took a bit of extra heat to the point where the base started going slightly melty. I got a bit suspicious and I just wanted to check there wasn't a solder bridge underneath, but it checks out fine. Happy days. And now, Monsieur et Madame, the bit we are all dreading. Try to force that through-hole cap into this tiny space. I have to be quite careful because the drive head leads will travel up and down behind the drive head. So I've got this space here. I think it will just about fit. Let's tin these pads. I'll pop enough solder on so I can just kind of tack the capacitor into place. And I do need to be careful actually, because thinking about it, that motor needs clearance as well. Oh blimey. Oh well, here goes. I'll bend the legs into the approximate position that they'll land on the board, and I'll make sure that they've got clearance from each other. I did toy with the idea of insulating one of the legs, but I don't think this is going to move, to be honest. Yep, that's not going anywhere. It's still in the way though, so maybe a gentle love nudge? Honestly, so much stuff's gone wrong in this video, I reckon I'm going to get cancelled. Let's see if the drive cabling will actually clear the capacitor. Well, the drive cables seem to fit into the sockets. Yeah, that looks great actually. Look at that, I'm a genius. Okay, maybe I'm not a genius. No one's going to see the sockets, so I'm not going to change them. We all make mistakes, don't we? Again, a cotton bud and some IPA and we can clean the large flywheel, or spindle hub if you prefer. Then we need to clean this bearing. It does take quite a while to get all the black stuff off. Eventually I did get it clean though. And then of course there's the brass pulley on our motor, which comes clean eventually as well. Before I forget and fit the drive pulley without putting the wires back on the board, I put the wires back on the board. At this point in this video I'm just pleased to avert yet another disaster. Right, let's find that belt. Here it is, and I got it from DataServe Retro. Nice and easy, no fuss, just fits, just works. If you're in one of the half of a percent of the population who's looking to fix your SAM Coupé drive, then you might want to look at your drive first, because there are a couple of different drive mechanisms. It would be a bit annoying to get the wrong belt now, wouldn't it? There's a bit of luck involved here. I tend to just hook the belt around the drive pulley, pop the motor gantry into place, and keeping a moderate amount of tension on the belt, I route it around the flywheel. The trick here is just to be deliberate and gentle. At this point I need to get the belt and bring it down around the bearing. So I grab the tweezers and gently lift the belt into place. I make sure that the belt is properly seated. And really it's that simple. The belt will centralise itself as you rotate the flywheel. And you can tell if it's working because if you look through the itty bitty holes on the motor, you'll be able to see the motor moving. Of course, the next thing to do is get a screw into that gantry quick smart. You don't want it to come out and all your hard work and luck to be undone. There's quite a bit of dust in the drive, but I'll air dust it outside the cabin before I pop it back into the SAM Coupé. Before I place the drive cage back on, I want to use some lovely lubrication, anywhere metal meets metal. And this will do fine, silicone grease that's plastic safe. I bought this tube about 3 years ago, it's really lasted. I'm using a conical swab that's allegedly lint free. I'm not really sure though. And anywhere that metal meets metal gets a little bit of grease, just working on the basis that it really can't hurt. I've experienced some stiff units in the past and they've been a real pain in my backside. We'll also pop a little bit of lube on the drive head guide shaft, or whatever this manufacturer chooses to call them. This is why it's important to use plastic safe lube, because you don't know what components are inside. For this pressed metal stuff though, everything's okay. Right, now we need to get the top half of the drive cage back in, and this is the part that most people dread, but it's fairly easy. You're just reversing the process of sliding it into the left hand side and setting the pinions on top of their guide rails. At this point they won't go down into the track, and that's normal. We can let go of the head now as well because it will ride along on the top of the drive cage, leaving our hands free to undo our earlier vandalism. Replace the tensioner springs whilst holding our breath in case they slip off and end up shooting away, never to be seen ever again. Yes, that's happened. Once both the tensioner springs are on, the pinions will drop back into their guide rails and a disc can be inserted, and that means the mechanism is back together properly. Brilliant! The eject button just pushes back in and locks when it's in place. But the dust flap takes a bit more finagling. You need to make sure that you pop it on so that the flap is on the inside of the front of the drive, not on the outside. It's a common gotcha. Once it's in place, you just take the spring, slide it through this slot on the right, and hook it into its retention notch. And that's the story on how I became an expert with flaps. The top metal cover of the drive just pops back on. And it's secured by one screw, which also further secures the drive motor gantry. And as far as the Citizen unit is concerned, that's the floppy drive all back together. Let's pop it into the SAM drive caddy. I'm doing this upside down so that you can see why the drive itself is a bit loose inside the caddy until it's secured in the SAM through the two rear screw holes. The two screws go through the bottom of the machine and fix the SAM drive in place. Okay, exciting times, let's see if it works. And I'm quietly confident. It's a huge relief to see the SAM still working. But weirdly, that visual defect has disappeared that we had before. How odd. Who knows? Unfortunately, in the interim since the last video, the bloody keyboard has stopped working properly and only half the keys are working. This will limit how much we can do to actually test our drive. Although luckily the F9 key is still working, so we will be able to try and boot some software. Let's turn the power off before we insert our drive. I'm going to be lazy and just slide it in. We've got a lot of work to do on this machine, so there's no point in any extra screwing. With the disc inserted, we power on, and for the test I've got a crap disc that nobody cares about. Bloody lemmings. F9 starts the boot sequence. And all signs are good, we don't have that awful noise anymore. And the drive starts to load the game. But disaster strikes, because it turns out that the drive is completely fixed. And much to my disgust, lemmings loads. Gross. Seriously though, lemmings is one of those childhood things that people remember, like rickets and poverty. Unfortunately, the keyboard's broken, so I can't play it. Oh no! But I did have a go at loading some other bits and bobs, and I have to say that this version of Battlezone looks incredible. I'm really looking forward to playing this. In fact, I'm really looking forward to learning all about the SAM Coupé, but there's much more work to do. We need to make a dedicated power supply, maybe from this Meanwell unit, or one of these Meanwell units. They all have the required voltages, more or less. With the floppy fixed, I want to add a GoTech and investigate this RGB to HDMI that was given to me by Retro Robbins. I also fixed the other drive and I didn't melt the connectors on this one, which is, you know, good. With my broken keyboard, there's only one game I can play to finish the video. Flappy Bird only uses the space bar. I've never actually played this game before, I know it was big on mobile phones. It's quite easy. Stupid game. What rubbish game? Well, still better than Lemmings. Massive thanks to my amazing patrons appearing on the screen right now. Patrons get ad-free early access to all my videos. They get exclusive access to behind the scenes videos that are posted on Patreon. Patrons also get the supernatural ability to transform into a tortoiseshell cat and roam the night freely. That might be a lie. If you'd like to see your name on this screen, then come along to patreon.com/MarkFixesStuff. Patrons really drive this channel, and without them I wouldn't be able to make this kind of incredibly long-winded content. If you're still watching now, then thank you so much. I mean, seriously, I'm going to say thank you. I'm not going to say anything mean because you're obviously a nutter. If you think this video was interesting, my next video is going to be reviewing an air duster. I kid you not. It's quite a good one though. Takes batteries and stuff. So many people on the screen, and I'm so grateful to all of them. That's actually a picture of Big Si on the right. Anyway, I'm off now. Thanks so much for watching. I'll be really grateful if you'd watch some more of my videos. Where's that test card thing? Where is it? Oh, here it is. Yeah, click one of these. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you very much. Please to click.